Memory is a selection of images, some elusive, others printed indelibly on the brain. Each image is like a thread, each thread woven together to make an intricate tapestry. And the tapestry tells a story, and the story is our past. Peace and love, family, and welcome back to another Sunday Hope and Healing session. I'm Royce Fletcher Thomason, and we're here every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with this Sunday Hope and Healing sessions, where we endeavor to bring encouragement, insights that will hopefully offer something of value for you, that will help speak to you in ways that bring a greater degree of fulfillment, a greater degree of wholeness, greater degree of well-being. And we actually offer healing that can be used for really every area of your life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and really all areas of your life. And we do this through a methodology referred to as Transcending the Matrix, which is a holistic-based approach to healing that really addresses all aspects of a person's beingness. And so our topic, or our theme for today, is healing from childhood trauma and family drama, or becoming free of childhood trauma and becoming free of family drama. And I feel like these two go so profoundly together. I started off this Sunday Hope and Healing session with a quote. The quote were actually the last words spoken in the movie Eve's Bayou, which is a movie that was out decades ago. And I'll say it again, memory is a selection of images, some elusive, others printed indelibly on the brain. Each image is like a thread, each thread woven together to make an intricate tapestry. And the tapestry tells a story, and the story is our past. And the reality, beloved, is that we all have a story, and we all have a past. And the way that our lives unfold later on in life is significantly, or tends to be significantly, influenced by things that happen in our life experience early in life. Okay, so what happens is that we, like a computer, are programmed. We're programmed via the sensory inputs that we take in and that we allow inside of our beingness, whether we allow it inside our psyche. We allow these things that have been a part of our life experience to even take root in the cells of our bodies and different parts of our bodies. And so we might have a physical issue that might show up as a result of some unresolved emotional issue or some trauma that could have been from childhood or long ago, early at an early point in our life. And so what is trauma? I'm going to give this simple definition of trauma. It's just a definition that I found online, and I'm going to use it. The trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, accident, crime, natural disaster, physical or emotional abuse, neglect, experiencing or witnessing violence, death of a loved one, war, and more. Okay. And there are all types of traumas that we experience. As a matter of fact, we experience trauma before we're even born. We experience trauma. We experience things that have a psychological impact upon us before we're ever born. When we are, like all mammals, or most mammals, I think a platypus is maybe one of the rare exceptions. We develop as embryos and as fetuses inside of our mother's womb. We are 100% completely dependent upon our mothers for the sustaining of our lives, for us to be able to develop. We are 100% completely dependent upon our mothers. We're dependent on our mothers for water that we take in. We are dependent upon our mothers for the food and nourishment that we take in. We are dependent upon our mothers for the elimination of waste that we excrete. Okay, without our mothers helping us with that process, we wouldn't be able to eat. We wouldn't be able to take in oxygen. We wouldn't be able to take in water that allows the nutrients to, through the process of osmosis, diffuse over the cells, bringing the vital nutrients to all of the cells of the body. And likewise, when each of those cells of the body excrete waste, because anything that eats has a byproduct or waste product that comes from that, for it to then be cleared out of the body, out of all the cells of the body and the body as a whole, we rely wholly upon our mothers for that. And in a similar way, we hear everything that our mother hears, and we are subject to the emotional changes that take place within her, because we're actually one with her during that roughly 9-month period. And so we experience forms of fetal trauma before we're even born. We experience forms of trauma just in the process of being born. Being born is a traumatic experience. You've been in this protective sea of amniotic fluid. You've been completely covered in your mother's belly, and then you're birthed out into an environment where there are all these strange lights. A lot of times there's a lot of chaos going on, and then you end up being smacked on your backside just the moment that you're born. All of this stuff is happening. You might have been born breech or frank breech. There might have been a series of things that happened that made the delivery process difficult. It could have been a cesarean section. There are a lot of different things that could have happened in your birth process. So there's trauma that takes place before you're born. There's trauma that takes place in the process of being born, and there's trauma that takes place in the early years of your life. And having trauma is not a unique experience. We might experience it in unique ways, but there's nobody that hasn't experienced some form, or some forms, I should say, of trauma. There's trauma that we go through from difficult emotional experiences. Some of these traumas are acute traumas that happen from a singular event. There's some traumas that take place over time, where there's a continuation of the same sort of thing that's happening on an ongoing basis. There's trauma that the body experiences from going through a surgical procedure, and oftentimes even from a dental procedure. There's trauma physically that can be experienced when a person has a physical accident of some sort. There's sexual trauma that a person can certainly experience. And I learned several years ago just how rampant that is. But a reality is that we all have stuff, right? We've all got some stuff that we need to work on, that we need to become free of. And a lot of times we end up having situations in our lives that are the result of our unresolved trauma. And that can manifest in states of physical health or lack thereof. It can manifest in terms of how we relate to other people. It can manifest in terms of our overall mental health, manifesting later in life as depression or as anxiety, and all of these different things, right? And so, when I read that definition, I actually meant to pull it up on the screen. I'll pull it up again, though. Not again, I said it before, but I'll actually pull it up. We all experience this in one way or another, right? And your experience might not be the same as somebody else's experience. Somebody else might have gone through one thing, you might have been through something else, and other people might not think that your experience is actually that bad in comparison to whatever their experience might have been. And there's no such thing as comparative trauma, right? Because no one else has your exact same makeup. Nobody else has your exact specific series of life experiences that you've had under the specific conditions that you had, and nobody else has your specific makeup. Nobody else has the exact same internal wiring that you do. And so let's be mindful about not minimizing other people's trauma, or even, minimizing your own in comparison to someone else's. But our focus for today is really dealing a little bit more specifically with the trauma that is experienced at early stages in life, relatively early stages in life, when we're in the process of growing up, right? And childhood trauma can frequently manifest as family drama later on. And I'm not laughing at anybody. I'm acknowledging that we've all got some of it in different ways, right? It may manifest in different ways, okay? In terms of how it manifests in you is unique and it's specific to you, and I honor that, whatever that is, and however that might show up. But I would like to say that in 20-something years of doing this healing work, there are several things that come up often in terms of the root cause. And in this work of Transcending the Matrix, and I know we were away for a couple weeks where we just had these brief check-ins. Last week I was in New York, we had a brief check-in then. The week before, we had the Transcending the Matrix intermediate level training that was going on, dealing with mental and emotional healing, neurological upgrading, and brain optimization. And so we just had a few minute check-in that took place in the midst of while that class was going on. And so we're back today, but what this work endeavors to do is to address the root cause of whatever a person might be dealing with, the root cause. Like whatever you're experiencing, whether it's in your state of affairs, whether it is in your body temple, whether it is in your relationships, whether it is in your finances, greetings, Curly Conscious King, whether it is in terms of your spiritual walk and journey, your mental health, all of it, all of the things that are not operating at a state of complete homeostasis, all of the things that are not operating at or functioning at an optimal level. It's because there's something at the root of that is standing in the way of you operating optimally, or you functioning optimally, or you being the highest and best version of yourself. And I mentioned earlier about there's trauma that we experience before birth. A reality is that we carry trauma in our DNA from ancestors who came before us. You might feel like, listen, I got enough trauma and drama in my own life. I don't need somebody else's on top of mine. And the reality is that's just how it works, right? You stand on the shoulders of those who came before you. We all do. They're blessings that we get to enjoy that we had nothing to do with causing them to come about. We enjoy fruit that comes from seeds that we did not plant. Okay. And, it just kind of works both ways in that there's also things that those who came before us weren't able to work out in their own lifetime. And we have the responsibility of doing our best to work those things out. Okay, this is true on an individual level, it's true on the family level, it's true on a societal level. There are things that we endeavor, hopefully, with each generation, we get better. Hopefully, with each generation, we grow and evolve. Doesn't always quite work out that way, but that is the intention, and that is what we'll hopefully endeavor to do and successfully realize. But I want to really acknowledge that no matter, again, no matter what a person is experiencing, if it's not at the optimal level, there was something that was at the root of that. Greetings, Jennifer Bliss. Good to see you in the space today. If you have, I tell the story sometimes of a lady who fell on her bike and sprained her ankle and had been limping, and we crossed paths. She had been limping for a few months, I think about 3 months at the time. She was limping obviously because her ankle hurt. Her ankle hurt obviously because she sprained it. She sprained it obviously as a result of this bike accident. You know, it doesn't take, somebody who's, got an MD or a DO in front of their name to be able to figure that stuff out, right? But even falling on the bike, having the bike accident, that wasn't the root of her ankle issue. Now we could look at it on the surface level and figure that out, but anything that's happening in the physical world is really just manifesting as an effect. It's not the ultimate cause. And so what my responsibility was to look at, okay, why did she have this bike accident in order to sprain it, in order to be having these issues that she's having with it now? And so what turned out to be the case within her life experience, and this wasn't something, that you're gonna find in a book in medical school, but in this lady's particular case, it had to do with, the dynamic in her early childhood life. When she was born, she had 2 other brothers. Like my sister, she and grandmother, maternal grandmother, she was born with 2 older brothers. And she was the only girl and the baby when she came to the family. And I know from experience that's a significant place in the family. To be the baby and the only girl, that's a special place. Well, I think it was like 13 months after she was born, something happened. Another baby was born, and that baby was also a little girl. And so for this little 13-month-old, something very quickly changed for her. I'm sure that her parents were good parents, well-meaning. I'm sure that they still continued to pay attention to her, just as they paid attention to her. Just as they continued to pay attention to her older brothers when she was born. But something changed in that family dynamic, and she knew it. And she knew it. And it wasn't like she was having a bad relationship, several decades later with her sister, quite to the contrary. But there was some unresolved stuff from a long time ago. We got that resolved, and for the first time in 3 months, she walked without a limp. For the first time in 3 months, she walked without pain, and that didn't come back. That issue didn't come back. What was at the root of her sprained ankle? What was at the root of her pain? What was at the root of her bike accident? Was some unresolved stuff from when she was a little girl. All right. Now, how did that trauma play out when she was younger in life? That I don't know. Okay. But what I do know is that we resolved it, and she walked out without the limp that she had before. Because a reality is that there's stuff that's going on inside of us that if we don't resolve it, it's going to find its way to get some attention. If there's something, because we really were designed to be whole. And if there is an aspect where the wholeness isn't manifesting itself. It's going to find a way of making its way to the surface and calling out for attention to have the light shone on it so that there can be healing brought to that space, because we were divinely designed to be whole. And so let's get into this with respect to the whole childhood trauma thing. And let me kind of start with this. This is something I can certainly relate to, and many others can. At least 50% of marriages end in divorce, right? There's trauma that comes with that. There are plenty of people who are born into situations where both of their parents aren't there. There's trauma that comes with that. There are people who circumstances cause one or both parents something to happen to them where they can't be physically present. And even a lot of times when they are physically present, may not be emotionally present, right? There are those who are adopted. I just saw, now I announced last Sunday, during last Sunday's check-in, that this is what we would be dealing with today. As just something that was on my heart. And I saw just today a situation where a lady, when she was a baby, she was adopted. The adoption was, it was determined that that adoption was going to happen well before this child was born. And as a matter of fact, it happened to be a chance encounter, if you will, between this lady's mother and who would be her adopted father. And in that particular case, you know, this man had been wanting to have a child, agreed to adopt this baby, and did some stuff in the paperwork where the mother would be giving all her rights away and everything. And the way that even the way the paperwork was set up, it made it very difficult for this person, who would obviously later grow up to know the truth. And she was told since she was very young that her mother died, and that's why she was adopted. And that was not true. It was not true. She now, as an all the way grown woman, has a relationship with her birth mother. And her father, by the way, died when he was 6. She ended up being taken care of by her adopted grandmother, but she never knew that she was actually adopted in the first place. She was told that she wasn't. Anyway, you think that creates some drama? I can tell you from my experiences dealing with folks who've been adopted, it definitely creates some trauma. Okay. All right. And whatever your situation is, I don't know what specifically yours is, but what I do know is that we've come to a point now where we're going to do some healing regarding it, where we're going to do some healing. I do want to speak to something though, and this is just coming up, and so I wasn't planning on addressing this, but it's coming up. Years ago, years and years ago, I was part of a men's group, and this was when the Oprah Winfrey Show was still coming on television, and Tyler Perry was a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and he confessed to having been sexually abused when he was growing up. And we ended up talking about this in this men's group. And in that men's group, half of the men there admitted to having been sexually abused growing up. And out of them, half identified as same gender loving and or as gay, and the other half tried to have sex with as many girls and women as possible to prove to themselves that they weren't, right? And that kind of started a whole thing. At the time, I used to have a radio show called The Sacred Meets the Secular, and we actually had that as a topic, dealing with sexual abuse as a topic. And so I was doing a lot of research, and it was saying that like 3 out of 6 males end up experiencing sexual abuse growing up, and 4 out of 6 females experience some form of sexual abuse growing up. And it just happened to have been that I saw something today where that was the case with a young woman when she was a teenager, from somebody that she respected and that was supposed to be a protector in her life. In this particular case, unfortunately, it was her pastor. And it went on for years. But what ended up happening, and what often happens, is the victim ends up being victim shamed. And so there's a whole nother level of trauma that goes along with that. A whole nother level of trauma that goes along with that. And so anyway, we're going to get into some of this. There's a lot that goes with this, and childhood trauma can come in many different forms. But we're going to endeavor to do some healing on this and help get some folks a greater degree of freedom from that. And also, and really the family drama could have been a whole separate topic, but I feel like the two really are significantly connected to one another. All right. So I'm going to do a prayer. If you know somebody who you feel like would benefit from this, please share it with them. And maybe share why you're sharing it with them, because it is a bit of a sensitive topic. You may want to handle it gingerly, but let's go ahead, and I'm going to start with a prayer. And if you want to benefit from this healing, plug your name into this prayer. If you know of someone else who you feel like could benefit from this, plug their name into it. Okay. Oh, beautiful and perfect God, who is the source of all that is good and all that is beautiful. Thank you that you are a healer. I know you to be a healer. And through the union that we share, through the power of your pure love and divine light, I demonstrate you as a healer on the behalf of whoever chooses to plug their name into this prayer, or whoever is having their name plugged into this prayer by someone else, for the purpose of neutralizing the root cause and all cumulative effects of all forms of childhood trauma, from the point of the causal root and the entire energy field and every strand of DNA and every cell of each one of our or their bodies, and transmuting it into and replacing it with a sense of true freedom, of true wholeness, of complete freedom of self-expression, self with the uppercase S. And I bear witness to our wholeness on this date and in this time and space called now. Thank you. Thank you, God, for this gift of your divine love. It is done. It is done. It is done. All right, so let's first and foremost get into the, remember, let's go back to this kind of definition of trauma. It's an emotional response to stuff that's happened. Okay, could be stuff that we've seen, could be stuff that has been done to us, if you will. And I want to first start with ongoing, continuous feelings of neglect. So we're going to purify those through the power of God's pure love. For different people, how much of that will vary. For what period of time that will vary. But for the collective, we're calling that transformed and purified through the power of God's pure love. Okay. Ongoing neglect of not having needs met. And I want to first of all look at having, not always having physical needs met. Those physical needs could come in the form of physical affection. It could come in the form of physical presence. It could come in the form of proper nourishment. It could come in the form of, just there being a place that's physically safe for them to be. Okay. All right. So let's deal with some of that sense of physical neglect and physical abandonment. So we're going to purify that through the power of God's pure love. And we're going to replace that physical abandonment with the felt experience of God's loving presence. Now, I know that can be difficult for people sometimes, even a lot of the time. Something that you can't see. You feel the absence of what you can see, but sometimes it's maybe a little bit more difficult to feel the presence of what you can't see. All right. And so let's deal with the emotional experience of emotional neglect, of times where your emotional needs weren't honored. I want to say, and I want to make this very clear, I'm not bashing any parent. Okay. All of you are somebody's offspring. Many of you have offspring of your own. I'm not wanting to bash anybody in terms of their parenting. No matter how good the parent is, there's some blind spots that are going to be there. No matter how good of a parent you might be, no matter how intentional and conscientious you might be, there are going to be some things that you're going to miss. There was a show that used to come on television called This Is Us. Loved that show. And This Is Us, dealt with different family dynamics. And the guy, his name was Jack. I thought that Jack was a phenomenal father. My own father, commented about him being like the best father that's ever existed, and yet there were things that he missed. There were some blind spots that he had. There were some things that he just didn't get right. I'm using that as an example. Similarly, no matter how good of a mother your mother might be or might have been, there's some blind spots that she's had, no doubt, because she's human. And so There may have been times where you, as a young child, felt like your authentic needs weren't prioritized, or that they took a backseat to your parents' needs, or they took a backseat to your siblings' needs, or they took a backseat to a romantic partner's needs. So all of these we want to, and I should have done them individually because they all showed up as issues. I'm going to purify those, each one through the power of God's pure love. Okay. All right. Now, still an issue. There's a lot going on in connection with this. That's why I say I probably should have done each of them separately, because there's a lot that's connected with this. Okay. And so a lot of times when we end up as young children being or feeling neglected in some way, or feel and experience our needs not being met, we create stories about that. Remember, memory is a selection of images, some elusive, others printed indelibly on the brain. Each memory or each image is like a thread, each thread woven together to make a tapestry of intricate texture. And the tapestry tells a story, and the story is our past. I call that tapestry the matrix. Okay. I call that tapestry the matrix. The things that we've experienced, that we've taken on, that filter, that serve as a filter for how we see ourselves and how we feel the world. And as young children, when we have some authentic needs that end up not being met, we get this deeply held subconscious belief somehow in lack. We get deeply held subconscious belief systems with respect to our own worthiness, our own lack of worthiness. We learn different coping mechanisms that could manifest as inferiority or superiority complexes. Neither one is really better than the other. They're both manifestations of profound insecurity. Okay. And some of that has to do with, covert teaching, and some of it has to do with overt teaching. Regardless of how it became part of our socialization, it creates, and I just did this instinctively. It creates something in our psyche that causes our psyche to be askewed, right? Which detracts from our mental health. All right, and so let's look at early childhood socialization regarding our sense of worthiness. And by the way, I need to, and I know I've done this before, offer a distinction between worthiness and entitlement. Entitlement is not worthiness. Worthiness is recognizing that as a being made in the image and likeness of God, as a being who is first soul, that is ultimately a child of God, because you are made of the same stuff, or are made of the same stuff that God is made of. Because of that, you are automatically worthy, not based on any particular set of circumstances or conditions. There's no condition or circumstance that can make you worthy. There's no condition or circumstance that can make you unworthy. Okay. Entitlement works a little bit differently. Entitlement is, is a sense that you're owed something, based on whatever your conditions might be. Okay. There's a certain sense of entitlement that a person gets as a result of their socialization. But that entitlement is not the same thing as worthiness, because one who is truly in touch with their sense of worthiness is also aware with what the basis of their sense of worthiness is. And if they're truly in touch with the basis of what their worthiness is actually rooted in, then they must necessarily recognize that everyone else is just as worthy as well. Okay. All right. So let's get into, I want to address kind of some programs of separation. So we're going to purify those through the power of God's pure love, bringing the light of God's pure love into the places and spaces within our innermost being. All right. Now, I want to look at, because what we set up in the prayer is addressing the root cause of this childhood trauma and family drama, as well as the cumulative effects. All right. And so this is a lot to try to cover for a whole bunch of people whom I don't even know who everybody is, all at the same time, with everybody having their own unique individual experiences. So I'm not trying to guarantee that from being here, you'll never have any family drama again, or that you're automatically going to be completely free of all childhood trauma that you've ever experienced. But this is endeavoring to help at least lighten that some. Okay. If you want more, you have to book an individual appointment for that. But we're going to endeavor to, to offer what support we can on a collective level. Okay. All right. And so I want to take a moment right now and I want to look at feeling like some other person was favored over you, and purify that through the power of God's pure love. Feeling like some other person was favored over you. There is family drama that is happening right now as this Sunday Hope and Healing session goes, from something that happened thousands of years ago, of one that was largely connected to one person, one offspring feeling unfavored under another, and the other offspring feeling favored over the other. Yeah, I don't want to get too deep down that rabbit hole. I know I've addressed it before. But there was a certain man, I'm not even going to get into the particulars of it, but there was a certain man, well, maybe I'll get into a little bit. There was a certain man who had been promised children, and he and his wife had been together for a long time, didn't have any children together. His wife suggested that he go, to one of the people that worked in the house and be with her so that he could have his baby. He did that, had a baby. It was a son, and his name was Ishmael. And he and his mother lived in the house for a little while. And after a little while, the father, um, it didn't take long for some family drama to kick off. And his wife wasn't liking the situation, gave him an ultimatum um, to send his son, his firstborn son, and 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 that child's mother away. And so that was what he did. He discarded his firstborn son as well as his mother. Okay. And then he ended up having another son, whose name ended up being Isaac after with his wife, sometime later. And what happens? What's happening right now between between the Muslims and the Jews in the Middle East is a function of that family drama, of one feeling, not only feeling, but actually being discarded, and the other one, having maybe a little bit of a superiority complex about being who was chosen, and assume that it was God that made the choice, when really it was the people who made the choice out of a place of ego, the part that tries to edge God out. And this isn't taking anything away from any particular religious group or anything. It's just that that's what the situation is, or that's what the situation was, and it's still manifesting its problems today. And so there are people, and it's a trauma on both sides. I learned years ago that when a person experiences domestic abuse, it impacts the wiring, the brain function of both parties, the one who's being abused. And what I found quite interesting is that it actually had an even more significant psychological impact on the person who was doing the abusing and getting away with it unchecked. All right, so both of them are being jacked up in one way or the other. Okay, so let's look at those who felt favored under someone else, or that someone else was favored over them, as well as the one who felt favored over another or the others. All right, want to balance that out through the power of pure love and transmute that into and replace it with the sense of authentic, genuine worthiness based on beingness, not based on birth order, not based on similarity to a particular parent, not based on gender, or any of those other things. We have a lot of blended families. Sometimes, who came along first, may find themselves, kind of taking a back seat in some ways. So I want to address that specific issue, purifying that through the power of God's pure love. And all of these, just about all of these, I feel like it could be a whole healing session on each one of these different things. Okay. All right, so let's look now at let's look at it's sometimes referred to as like a scratch in the record on our brains. I started DJing back in the 80s using vinyl, right? And if you know anything about a record, an actual vinyl record, you put the stylus, which contains a needle, on top of the record, and the needle or the stylus goes through these grooves, and inside the grooves are where the audio is recorded. Sometimes a record would be physically scratched, and if there would be a scratch on the record, sometimes you'd get a situation where the needle wouldn't move past that scratch. It wouldn't be able to continue, going forward on the record, it would just be stuck in that one spot. Even though the record would continue to spin, the needle would just never go past the place where the scratch is. It would be stuck there. And a lot of us have situations where we've experienced some trauma and we've been stuck in that trauma, childhood trauma that ends up manifesting later on in life. My personal belief is that there's an abundance of people in positions of what we would call significant degrees of power in the world today that are stuck from something that happened early in their childhood. Okay. So we want to purify this through the power of pure love, clearing that scratch on the record. Turning on the all clear button in the brain. Or turning on the all clear signal in the brain, I should say. All right. Now, in terms of that story, you know, the one that I was sharing from Eve's Bayou about memories and how we all have kind of these stories, if you will. I'm gonna put it up on the screen actually. The whole thing won't fit on the screen. Maybe if I do it on the bottom of the screen, the whole thing will fit. Okay. All right. So I have it running on the bottom of the screen now. Actually. Okay, I like that better. Okay. All right, let's get back to it. Apologies for the distraction. My goodness, it's 1:54. All right, we don't have much time left. All right, so I want to deal right now with I want to deal with like feeling stuck in the middle. Into the root of feeling stuck in the middle. Clearing that from the point of the causal root. And also all cumulative effects. Okay. This is no shortage of an experience for many people having, whether their parents are married or not, whether their parents are together or not, of feeling like caught in the middle. And then that can create all types of patterns of codependency, actually. So let's actually look at helping to kind of loosen those patterns of codependency and reroute the brain wiring for healthier outcomes, healthier approaches, and healthier outcomes. Creating new neural pathways in the brain that allow for a more healthy, much more healthy approach. Okay, thank you, God. Okay. All right. Let's look at. Want to look at unresolved guilt and unresolved shame from childhood, and transmuting that guilt and that shame into deep self-acceptance. A deep self-acceptance. And also deep self-love and deep self-forgiveness. Ooh, was a big one. And deep self-forgiveness. Even if there isn't anything that you did wrong, there's a reason that you felt the way that you did. And because you felt the way that you did, it's important to be able to forgive self. So strengthen that in terms of that self-forgiveness. And also extending the self-forgiveness, but also receiving the self-forgiveness. That's actually a big thing. So let's strengthen us where that's concerned in terms of strengthening our ability to receive self-forgiveness. And strengthen our ability to tell a new story about our past. Okay. I want to right now look at sometimes it can be hard for us to learn to tell a new story. But it's important that we release the baggage. Okay. So let's look at strengthening our ability to release the baggage, weakening our attachment to the baggage, and even our addiction sometimes to the baggage. Okay. Part of the healing is letting go of the baggage. We've got to be willing to let go of the baggage, to be able to unpack it, let go of it, release that weight that's keeping us from moving forward. Okay. All right. And in terms of the baggage, I want to look at like emotional baggage. I want to look at, even emotional baggage that might be tied to physical things that one can still see. Let's purify that through the power of God's pure love. In terms of that emotional baggage, some of us don't have the opportunity to get from our parents now what we didn't get from them when we were younger. Some of us, they may not be here anymore. They just may not have the tools to be able to do it now, even if they are here. And so sometimes, even if we haven't been parented in all the ways that we needed to when we were younger, there's still a part of us, of our inner child, that still needs to be protected, that still needs to be raised up. Raised up, that's what I want to say. All right, and so I want to strengthen us to be able to reparent our own inner child. Let's boost us all in terms of strengthening us all to be able to have creative solutions for reparenting our own inner child. Giving our own inner child now, being able to give our own inner child whatever it was that we didn't get at that time much earlier in life, regardless of when that started. Okay. The reality is that your brain doesn't know the difference between what happened then and what's happening now. A lot of times we experience stuff in the now as if it's happening now, but it was from something that happened a long time ago. And so we might be triggered by things that happen now. It's not the situation that took place a long time ago, but that might trigger. There might be triggers from old situations that are unresolved. And so we're going to kind of create, a lot of times we think about time as being something that's linear, that we can remember the past and that we can change our future. And I like to kind of switch the paradigm on that in terms of remembering our future and changing our past. We change our past by telling a new story. It doesn't mean that we're denying that we had a negative experience. We're just telling a different story about our past. It doesn't mean that we're lying to ourselves about the past. It doesn't mean we're denying the fact that the bad thing that happened to us, we're not denying that that ever happened. We're not pretending that we were always okay. We're just telling ourselves a different story about it, a more empowered story about it. Okay. And so, in a similar way, in terms of remembering the future, I want to encourage us to, and I want to strengthen us to be able to develop tools to be able to in our minds, go to a point in the future and imagine a desired future, but not imagine a desired future as something that's taking place in the future, creating a memory of the future event, the thing that hasn't yet happened, remembering it in your mind, creating a situation where you remember it as a thing that's taken place in the past. This future thing, remembering it as it's taken place in the past, getting emotionally involved with it as a memory, this desired thing as a memory of something that already took place. And your mind doesn't know the difference. So when you harp on things that happened in the past, your mind doesn't know the difference of it being the past or it being the present, because you're still going to currently experience it. If you project to a future point and then go a little bit beyond that future point and remember that future as a memory of something that's already taken place, again, the mind doesn't know the difference. The mind can't distinguish the difference. And as we've said in the past, what you think about and you feel about, you bring about. Okay. And so we want to actually create a different story, a more healthy, a more life affirming story regarding those things that happened in the past to actually heal from the trauma. And then we want to go to a point in the future where we're creating a story and a memory of the whole version of ourselves once we've gotten to the other side of that. So what might that look like? Okay. So somebody give me an example of a childhood trauma that you might have experienced, and I can give you a suggestion on a way to tell a new story, to reframe that story, and then a way to tell a story regarding the future and to create a future experience that you can then remember as a past event. I don't feel like I'm articulating this quite as well as I want to. And I know that this is a challenge from broadcasting this on the stream. I know not everybody is necessarily sitting at the phone or at the computer. You might be fixing something to eat while in the midst of listening to this Sunday Open Healing session. And on top of that, I know it's about a 20 or 30-second delay from the time that I say it to the time that you actually hear it. And then that there'll be some time that will need to be taken to actually type it out. But it is 2:05 now Eastern. We're not going to go too long. If nobody actually says anything, it would have been useful because I could use that as an example rather than me trying to generically just make something up. Okay. Yeah, I can't say anything is just coming to me really readily. I'll do a couple more adjustments. Hopefully somebody will leave a comment. If not, so be it. All right, so let's look at, I'll do it this way. I'm going to do it in the context of a correction. And the correction that I'm going to do it in the context of is physical abuse. I'm going to purify that physical abuse from the past through the power of pure love. And the way that we're going to reframe that, the different story, is the different story that we can tell with regard to that is that this person hated themselves so much that they felt a need to abuse themselves. And the best way that they could find to abuse themselves was to utilize you to abuse themselves. I know that sounds really sick and demented. And let's own it that it is, okay? But from that, recognize that although the person who is maybe supposed to be your caregiver, sometimes a lack of caregiver, whoever they were, they're probably younger than how old you are right now, and probably less wise and probably less evolved than you are right now. And so now a way that we can reframe in the context of reframing that story is in the context of, Rocky, I've been meaning to reach out to you, and I apologize that I haven't. You have been on my heart this week, and I've been meaning to reach out to you. A way that we can actually reframe that is from the point of our more mature selves, being able to actually look back and have compassion on the one who was the causer of your pain, not in a way that gets them off the hook, but in a way where we recognize that it wasn't about us, that it was about their brokenness. And then in terms of going to that point in the future, remembering the future, creating a new future event that you then create a memory of that future event, is looking back at how this is a future point. You're going to a point in the future. This person could be dead and gone, but you're going to a point in the future where you're seeing the healing taking place. Not only the healing taking place, but the wholeness having manifested itself. I recently saw a thing where Terry Crews, the actor, was talking about his experiences with his father. His father was very abusive. He was abusive towards his mother. He was abusive towards himself and his siblings. And that became, and if you know who Terry Crews is, he's a big, muscular human being. He's a buff dude. And the basis of him becoming this big, muscular guy that he is now is because of what he experienced and what he saw when he was growing up, and wanted to put himself in a position to be protected from that. And a situation happened later on in life where he ended up actually beating up his father. He beat him up to within an inch of his life after his father had punched his mother in the face, right? And he said he got no satisfaction out of beating his father up like that. He said he got no satisfaction. That he thought it was going to be his feeling of getting even, but it did not do that for him. And at a later point, he spiritually got this sense that he needed to find something to thank his father for. That he needed to find something to thank his father for. And it was hard. He said it was hard for him to do. The only thing that he could think of was the fact that he ended up being born, and recognizing he wouldn't have been born if it wasn't for his father. And he called and he thanked his father for that. And his father broke down, and that's when his father ended up apologizing and trying to make things right. And it's not necessarily that he has still the closest relationship with his father today, because he is still establishing some boundaries and so forth. But that got him a very different experience than what he was looking for before, what he was looking at before, right? And so in that context, I'm kind of using that as an example, even if with respect to this abuser situation, if you can go to a point in the future and imagine as much as possible, let your imagination run wild to the point where you saw the healing taking place and you become emotionally present to it being something that's happening right now, or even better, remember the experience of it happening, even though it's already happened in the future, or even though it is to happen in the future. It's hard for me to look at time in a quote unquote normal way, because this is something that I endeavor to do, just like in life, sometimes better than others. I feel like there are definitely times where I communicate it better than I am right now. But let's, again, strengthen us to open up new neural pathways in the brain to be able to create a new story, and to even be able to create a story of something, a desired outcome in the future, as if it was a past event. Okay. And to be able to feel fully emotionally connected with that. All right. All right. And I'll just do one more thing and then we'll close out. And this, what's coming up for me is this concept of forgiveness. I heard Brother Spencer Murray say this, that forgiveness is releasing the hope that the past could have been different. And so let's look at, in terms of releasing the hope that the past could have been different, purifying that through the power of pure love. Acceptance of what was. Acceptance of the times in the past where we could not accept. And acceptance of the possibility of a new outcome, a new and improved outcome. And acceptance of the actual experience of a new and improved outcome. And gratitude for the experience of a new and improved outcome. God, thank you so much for the healing that's taking place today. I know there's a lot that's connected to this topic. It runs deep and spreads wide. Thank you for the healing that has taken place, for whatever pearl or gem that any of us might take away from this that might add value to our lives and help to free us up some, help us to be a little bit more whole. I give great thanks for that and pray your continued blessings upon each and every one of us. In Hashem Yeshua HaMashiach. Ashe and Amen. All right, beloved. Again, this was a topic that was really on my heart. I endeavored to cover, something that's pretty deep and pretty extensive in this short amount of time that we had together today, even going over by 25%. There's still a lot that's connected with this. If this is something that you personally deal with, feel free to reach out to me directly. And I'll be happy to offer you some direct attention. You can do that via Facebook on Messenger at Royce Fletcher Thomason, or Instagram at Royce Fletcher Thomason, or Transcending the Matrix. And if you aren't already subscribed to the Matrix Healing channel on YouTube, Matrix Healing, one word, I certainly encourage you to. There's a lot of stuff that's on there and it isn't always just about the words that are coming out of my mouth, right? You might hear the words that are coming out of my mouth, but there's a deeper healing. There's something that's happening that you may not be able to see and probably don't, aren't able to realize on a surface level, but the deepest places within your being are able to pick up on them. Okay. Again, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, I certainly encourage you to do so. I really want this message of love and hope and healing to be able to reach as many people as possible. We've been doing this for over 5 years now, every week. And do this in a committed way because I love us and I want us all to be whole. And I really do believe that a lot of the janky, jacked up stuff that happens in the world, and there's certainly plenty of it that's going on right now, that happens as a result of broken people making bad decisions. Broken people making bad decisions that affect us. And that happens on an individual level, and it happens on the larger scale. All right. But the more healed, the more of us are, the better it is for all of us. Really, literally, the better it is for all of us. When we're hurt people. And as the Course in Miracles says, when we're healed, we're not healed alone. Okay. Every bit of good that comes for us, that comes through us, is able to to the degree to which we operate out of a state of wholeness, we're able to bring more wholeness into the world. In his book, Power versus Force, Dr. David R. Hawkins talks about, as your consciousness elevates, as you grow, as you become a more spiritually evolved person, the more you're able to offset the brokenness in other people. And, I feel like I'm rambling at this point. We're going to go ahead and shut it down today and close this out, this session, today's Sunday Hope and Healing session. We've been talking about healing from childhood trauma and being free of family drama. And anyway, let us all continue to endeavor to enter into that sustainable state of supreme satisfaction. And until we meet again, I bid you adieu with peace and love. Catch you next time.